Hello, everyone, and welcome to Office Hours and to this, our 1500th consecutive show. Let me take just a second to acknowledge the hundreds of talented people who have made this program work over the past 4 years and to thank Alex for starting everything off for us back in those early days. 4 years plus, and it's been amazing every day. We are here to answer your questions about media and production 24/7. If you're watching on YouTube, you can always enter questions by using this QR code. That'll take you into askofficehours.global. If you don't have a way to shoot the QR code, you can type that into your browser, and it'll help you kind of get into the insides of Office Hours. In our second hour today, we're going to have a discussion of telling stories via editing and discuss some of the techniques editors use to keep audiences engaged by keeping the story front and center in their work. That's our second hour. Right now, it's time for your questions, so let's dive in. Courtney, what do we have up today? Oh, I'm sorry, not Courtney, Alexander.
It's Alexander.
First question is from Andy Kokendorfer from Viera, Florida. Are there any studies that show the effect, hopefully positive, of video and audio production upon viewer engagement? Do people watch produced content longer?
Courtney, start us off.
I'm wondering if he's asking about producers of YouTube videos. I was going to answer in response to producers of television programming. There's a theater here in Hollywood called Harmony Gold where they test all these TV shows and movies when they come out, and they put them in front of an audience, and they have these little dials, and they dial their interest up or down as they're watching the movie, and so they have a direct readout second by second of the audience's interest as the film plays. This is what testing is done, so they gauge whether the program is interesting or not. I'm sure Jeffrey and Alex can tell us about the YouTube metrics that are used to gauge interest in your YouTube videos, because they both have shown.
Jeffrey?
First of all, I was on one of those panels once, and that was just amazing. It's fun to play with the little dial. So according to Google Bard, it says yes, and I totally agree. That's why we have a Mr. Beast. If you don't know what Mr. Beast does to create his videos, he basically has several teams doing several shots, making several. I guess they make multiple videos, and then they review each video and they say which one is the best one to post. They look at thousands of thumbnails to see which the best thumbnail works for the video, because they can gain and lose a whole bunch of audience for there. So yes, having better audio, having better video in long form. I've been working on it myself. A lot of the videos that I've done, I used to do basically straight from toaster right to mouth when it came to stuff like CES and NAB. Now I'm sitting there and I'm trying to get a discernitive eye with the color, a discernitive ear with the audio, and sometimes that audio, you can't control a lot of the audio in a conference. So sometimes it can get really bad, really noisy. So you have to really tune it in and fix it. I can say that overprocessing can also be a down factor on the whole thing. But if you get a good produced content with stuff that people really want to listen to or watch, then the long form content is going to be perfect. It's going to be great for a lot of people.
Alex?
Yeah, we probably have to be specific about what produced content is, because there's so many ways to define that. I think that we generally find, there's a lot of variables. And here's the problem with studies in general, is that the act of the study damages the data. So every time you start to do it, we saw this Zoom fatigue early on in Zoom fatigue report from Stanford early on. And anybody who actually does events inside of Zoom or does a lot of meetings inside of Zoom knew without a study that everything about that study was wrong. And it was done by a person on the outside measuring something that they didn't understand. And they had, most studies are to buff up some opinion that somebody has already. Very few of them are actually blind studies that are actually, that's a really hard thing to do. And usually someone has an opinion and they build a bunch of data around it and they call it a study. And if they come from a university, people might actually read it. But from experience, what we see is that, when you make people work, and this is after, I haven't done a study, I've only done a couple thousand events, so I can tell you we look at the data for every one of these events. And what we see is we can see the drops when if you have 2 or 3 people with a good setup and you have one person with a bad setup, we can see the viewership drop at the time that they're talking. So people are just kind of winding out. And the longer they talk, the more people drop out. They just go do something else because the quality isn't compelling. Now, they stopped watching for a lot of reasons. Their audio and video is one of them. The veracity of the content that they're putting out is another one. The way that they produce that content, the way they express that content has a big impact on it. How interactive the event is has a big impact on it. It's not one thing that will drive that, and there are so many factors that it is hard to say one or the other. But when we see things that are very similar and people start dropping out around one person, we start to look at what they're doing, because we analyze every little bump, in these events to see what people are doing and look what happened in the event to do that. So while we haven't produced a study for Stanford or whatever, we have a lot of experience in this area, and I can definitely tell you that audio and video quality make a difference. And if you look at the other side of that, though, is that sometimes immediacy is more important than the quality. So you see this with news, you see this with a lot of other things where the speed at which you deliver it makes more of a difference than the quality. So we focus, heavily when we cover events, we do it live, and we don't have a lot of stuff coming out later because the reality is the wave will have passed, for people wanting to watch it. So unless if you're doing something at an event, typically, you need to get it out. It's valuable for 42 to 72 hours, and then after that, it's not. So you have to figure out how you fit into that box. And so unless you're talking about a bigger thing that will take more time to talk to, there's definitely things that if they have a longer shelf life, you then want to put a lot more energy into it because you want people to watch it for a longer period of time. So those are the type of things. I still find it's very rare. It's very hard to build content for a long period of time that is watchable as a VOD. And this really comes down to content density. So what you're competing with when you talk about the streamers, you're looking at Apple spends maybe $200,000 a finished minute. Netflix probably anywhere from $75,000 to $150,000 a finished minute. These are just averages of what those productions go. Some are a lot more, some are less. But the point is that as you go into those numbers, if you start to look at those numbers, you're competing with a lot of people doing something, that are there and working on it, and writers and process and everything else that's there. And even they have trouble keeping people watching it, And so what one of the reasons that TikTok and Shorts do well is because you don't have to hold up that rock for very long. So you can do something that's compelling for a minute. It's really hard to take that and make it 2 or 3 or 4 minutes down that path. And so those are those are things to think about there. But one of the things, the cheapest ways that we find, and it's why we do the show that we do it here, the cheapest way to keep people involved is interactivity. It is the thing. That's why Mukana exists, is because we found that the cheapest way to keep people connected is finding some way to interact with them. Oprah, after 30 years, said the only thing people want is to be heard. And she said, that's what I learned. And that's what you have. And figuring that out is the least expensive way. I'm not saying it's the best way, but it's the least expensive way to hold on to an audience.
Alexander.
Yeah, that's all very well said. And again, no studies, but one of the things that I've noticed over the years is that definitely the average viewer's tolerance specific to YouTube for bad audio, bad video has gone down. And I can tell because I can see the comments. When I go to watch people's videos and they have bad audio and bad video, you see the stream of comments. You got to buy a microphone. You got to buy a camera. So you see it in the comments. People will not be shy about telling you, put it that way.
And Jeffrey, you want to come back for a second?
Yeah, I totally agree with what Alexander just said, because I've had videos where I've gotten those comments before. It's like, yeah, I know I should have done that a little bit better. I should have angled that a little bit better. The other thing is, of course, the storytelling. And I will say that one thing that a lot of people have seen is that if you say, well, this video is going to be about video production, and you start talking about eggs, or you don't get to the point right away, then a lot of people start to drop off from there. So you could have the best produced video, but if you're misleading them into what the video is, they're going to drop off.
Let's go to the next question.
Next question is from Douglas Carmichael. SES is acquiring I can't read that. Sorry.
Intelsat.
Do you think this is in response to the growth of LiveU and other similar solutions? And there's a sportsvideo.org link posted there.
And Courtney's going to start us off. Courtney?
Well, perhaps. I guess Intelsat's main business, though, is aviation communications. So they make a lot of the satellite communication links for business jets and commercial airlines. So that's the majority of their business. I don't know. I guess there's some uplinks available to news crews that are shooting, still using satellite trucks for news Q-band. But so maybe if that section of their business may see more news crews moving to LiveU. I saw last night watching news coverage of the actions on the different campuses around the country. I saw a lot of people with LiveU backpacks, reporters in the field for the local television stations. So there's a lot less latency over LiveU than there is over satellite. So it's understandable if you're doing any type of two-way communications with a live reporter in the field. So maybe that's they're feeling a lot of pressure from the cellular connected versus satellite connected.
Alex?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the solutions are pretty flexible. Like with news, it really depends on whether that news is happening locally or whether they're out of range. Because a lot of times the news is doing some kind of microwave back to somewhere and then bouncing that back to them, which that latency is very low. Generally for the LiveU to be stable, its latency is not that much different than a satellite. As someone who I leased two LiveUs for 10 years. so we used them on every project, and they were relatively similar. In fact, we usually kept the buffer higher on the LiveUs to make sure that, because they were our backup to do that. So this market is getting smaller. Satellite market is getting smaller, and this has to do with the fact that, obviously, Elon Musk is putting some pressure on Starlink, is putting some pressure on that process. A lot of the airlines are moving to Starlink to solve their processes there. But also the TV market is getting smaller, and the uses as the internet gets better, there's just a lot less uses for satellite. It's still really useful, and I have a satellite truck arriving in a couple days for an event. When you absolutely need to have this actually get connected, and you don't have another connection there, satellites are still very useful. But the market is getting smaller; it's shrinking, and as a result, it has become harder and harder to. For them, it makes sense for two of the satellite providers to merge to take more advantage of a smaller market.
Let's go to the next question.
Next question is from Matthew LaCount in Oakland. LiveU Solo Pro can encode and deliver HEVC with 320 kilobits per second audio up to 20 megabits per second with 4 cellular modems bonded with Ethernet. What workflow, Osprey, Talent, and Peplink, would the Office Hours panel use for better results to YouTube? Dollar aware, please.
So there's some price sensitivity. Alex, what do you think?
The LiveU is very, very good at what it does. I mean, obviously, PepWave, is a PepLink and an Osprey Talon is useful. A LiveU. So one of the things, not a LiveU, but the Elemental Live, the Elemental Link. Is also really good. It has, when you're dealing with less bandwidth or more jitter, which is what you're going to get when you start bonding modems on your own, you're going to, having the Zixi wrapped with a little bit of Amazon glue to it is going to be one of the most stable ways to get out of a space. So the Osprey Talon is really great. This show comes to you via an Osprey Talon. But the Elemental Link is a very, very effective way to make that actually happen. Of course, if you're going to do it all the time, that cost per hour slowly adds up. But I think that is something to kind of consider is using some kind of Zixi protocol as it goes through a PepLink that you could put it through. Just realize that a PepLink is not the same as a LiveU. Now, it's more similar to the Solo. When you get the larger LiveU backpacks, those are based on contracts with cellular providers, and the paths that they're using are much different than what you get when you just push a bunch of little modems in. So you got to know that when you start rolling your own, it's not the same as the backpack. It is a different process as you go down that path. Fortunately, as we have 5G and LTE, most of these things, if you're using a variety of platforms, the reality is any one of those modems oftentimes can give you 20 megs a second. So it just depends on where you are and how that works. One thing to think about is with that Ethernet that Ethernet can be a Starlink. So if you're out somewhere else, you can bond that Starlink with the other cellular connections to get a better connection.
And let's go to the next question.
Andy Korkendorfer in Vieira, Florida asks, has anyone had success with the Wirecast ISO recording feature? I cannot get it to record more than two H.264 1080p ISO feeds concurrently using an i9 MacBook Pro. Thanks.
Jeffrey Powers, what do you think?
So when it comes to Wirecast and ISO recording, the biggest problem is I think you're running on a dying part of the system. I mean, you're working on a MacBook Pro, an Intel MacBook Pro, that is getting closer to end of life as quick because of all the M1, M2, M3, M4s that are coming out. So the support not only for Wirecast on an Intel Mac, but also support of the Mac itself is starting to get to the point where they're not looking at some of the serious updates that need to be done for that system. So that's the first thing. Being on a Windows machine would definitely help with that. Now, when it comes to ISO recording, I think we're still in the infancy when it comes to software switching ISO recording. And 1080p, I don't think I've heard of anybody that's done ISOs above that on Wirecast, above 1080p. So it's kind of tough. And a lot of it with time code and things like that. What I will do is I will call up vMix, and I'll take 4 1080p recordings and I'll mash it into one big 4K video, and that way I can then separate it out, and then I know exactly when it happens. So if a camera does cut out for some reason, it comes right back in at that point, and then I can bring it together so I can do a multi-mix down if I need to.
Alex?
I started my company doing live streaming on Wirecast. I would not recommend it for this mission. This is outside of its capabilities, in my opinion. I don't think that there's any way you're going to get up to very many stably on Wirecast right now. I think that they have to have a thought process related to where their software is and where they need to go with it to make it more stable. So I think that they're stretched something out a little too far, and the stability issues that we've had have been catastrophic. So that's my 2 cents about that.
Jeffrey, do you want to get back in with a quick comment?
Yeah, actually, there is an alternative that I'm thinking of, and that is Wirecast does have the ability to do each video to separate monitors. So if you did want to do like a screen scrape to something like a HyperDeck or a video monitor that records, then you can record each individual ISO on their own, and you can have them in the full ProRes and then bring that in afterwards. So that's a good alternative there.
Okay, hopefully that was helpful for you, Andy. Let's go into our next question.
Next question's from Scott Mueller in Germantown, New York. I saw a post somewhere saying that a TB Sonnet box couldn't handle the bandwidth for all 8 ports from a Decklink Quad Duo 2 for a vMix laptop. Should I use 2 Decklink quads in 2 chain Sonnet boxes instead?
Alex, what do you think?
I think it depends on what Sonnet box you have, what speed of Thunderbolt you're talking about, what your board is, your PC board is. So there's a whole bunch of variables there that we don't know. So it's very hard for us to chaining Sonnet boxes together. If it actually is the Thunderbolt speed is not going to help you because it's already saturated. I can tell you on an M1 with 8 gigs of RAM, we can easily push 8 signals out of a quad card with about 55% utilization of the CPU, and it just spits them out. So I don't know what all the other parts of your architecture are, but I'm telling you, with a $500 Mac, we can do this without any trouble at all over Thunderbolt. So I don't think it's the Sonnet box. But it also depends on which version and all the different pieces. So maybe try to give us a little bit more of what your specs are, and we might be able to figure it out.
Let's go to the next question.
Paul Walhus in Hot Springs, Arkansas asks, many think that the Tula field recording mic is kind of a joke when used as a Zoom mic, but I consistently get good reports, even better than the MV7. Is this mic underrated?
Jeffrey Powers, what do you think?
The Tula mic is mostly a tabletop microphone. You can mount it to a stand if you wanted to, but a lot of people end up don't doing it. It is a very awkward mic when it is set up into a boom arm. So getting it in front of your face, and you don't have any type of real windscreens or pop filters that you can put in front of it, so you have to jerry-rig something to get that to happen. So even if it is a better sounding microphone, getting it as close to the mouth as possible is the real challenge when it comes to that. And of course, when you get the farther away the microphone is, the more problems that you have.
Courtney.
Yeah, I think its reputation, its questionable reputation comes from its industrial design. If you take a look at it, it really reminds me of, a classic Remington shaver, and I think its industrial design, it harkens back to that. And although its specs, it records, it has built-in DSP that does noise reduction, Burr Brown op amps in it, and it's a USB. I guess it's USB only connection. I don't think it's an analog mic at all. It's switchable between cardioid and Omni, so it has a lot of good features. I think its industrial design is kind of making it a jokey looking thing because it doesn't look like your standard high quality microphone.
If you put it in the cabinet, though, nobody will ever steal it. Just put it right next to the aftershave, and they'll be completely confused. Alex, you had some thoughts.
Yeah, I don't, you may be getting good reports. I had a Tula mic, and I compared it to an MV7 specifically because we were trying to figure out what we were going to send out, and the MV7 was dramatically better than the Tula mic. I don't know what you were measuring or how you're measuring it, but I can tell you when I measured it, it wasn't really a conversation that lasted very long. It took me about 5 minutes to realize that the Tula mic was not anywhere near the MV7. So I'm sure that people are telling you that it's going great. I'm not saying that they're not, but I'm just telling you that I tested both of them head to head, and I was like, no, thank you. So I don't know how to compare our results. I can just tell you what my experience was.
Did it leave more stubble than the MV7?
Yeah, exactly. The funny thing is that I have to say that the new MV7 Plus that we talked about yesterday has my wallet like smoking. Because it solved the two biggest problems that we had, which was number one was noise reduction built into the hardware, and number two was that USB connection. And those were our biggest complaints about the MV7, the original one. And so we're pretty excited about testing that one. Hopefully we'll get to test it in the next couple weeks.
Yeah, until the show yesterday, I didn't realize that new MV7 had the USB and the XLR are both live constantly. It's not an either or. You could do two things with the two outputs.
I knew that it could do that. We just never thought about why we would want to do that.
Yeah. Her point was running the XLR out to a recording thing. Yeah, it made perfect sense.
Absolutely.
Alexander, I've done that before.
Yeah, and my 2 cents is, having not tested the Tula mic, I always get concerned when microphones go beyond just a basic analog microphone. As soon as you put an analog to digital converter in there with complicated stuff like you got FPGA processing and DSP and all this kind of stuff, then I start to worry about failure rates, getting support, service. And the main reason I would probably take an MV7, irrespective of the sound quality differences, would be, and especially if I'm buying them in high quantities, sending them out to guests in podcast kits, if something does go wrong, the likelihood of me being able to get it serviced locally by my local Shure dealer, far greater. And that to me gives me confidence, and some just brand new company that just started with a Kickstarter and they don't have the kind of same clout that Shure has, that would concern me.
Let's go on to the next question.
Next question's from Todd Rains in Allen, Texas. Have any of you heard of or used Behance?
Yeah, I've heard of it. I have not used it. Alex, Do you know something about
Behance is it's really we've seen it. I mean, it is but what it is it's for folks to put up their galleries, and it's a place that you can potentially hire freelancers. The hard part is that I think a vast majority of folks don't hire freelancers by looking at their gallery. I mean, I think that a lot of freelancers have a dream that people would do that, and maybe you get that every once in a while, but usually you get it from recommendations. So I think that a lot of us that do this a lot just don't have as much experience. I mean, you got to start somewhere, but it's hard to know whether that person, no matter how good their gallery is, how do they work with a larger team? Are they reliable? Are they, all those things are things you don't know. And so I think that that's always the challenge with a lot of these sites. And so I don't have a lot of experience working with it. Again, usually when I'm looking for someone, I'm asking my friends, who do you know that does this thing? And I probably either recommend somebody or ask for a recommendation 4 or 5 times a week. So there's you have to figure out how you get into that, and getting involved in communities like this one or other ones, and being part of it, working on projects sometimes, but getting involved with those things are the things that are important to make that happen. I know that for Todd, he's looking for probably someone to do some stuff for him. But I think that it'll be hit and miss. And so you just don't want to spend too much money until you get a sense of what the person can do.
Yeah, I've run into the same thing, and that's kind of how I feel about it too. Personal reputation really counts for more with me than does something that you may have taken a year to do and put up, and it's fabulous, but does that mean you could knock things out on deadline and are enjoyable to work with, which is really as much a part of this as your skill set in some cases. Let's go on to the next question.
Next question is from Douglas Carmichael. Sky Candy Studios is working with MSG to add drone video to both in-venue and broadcast production of New York Knicks games. How would you guard against losing the RF link to the drone in a congested RF environment?
Other than throwing money at it. Alex, what do you think?
I don't know how they're going to do it, but I can tell you how I would do it. Number one is that you have good frequency coordination. So typically these large event centers have very, very good frequency coordination. And that means people are actually measuring if someone else turned something on that wasn't agreed to, and they can get to you really quickly. I've been the receiver of that. You turn a Wi-Fi signal on, you turn another radio on, and they can find you very fast. And so good frequency coordination is part of it, is to make sure that you're the only one really managing those RF, and everyone has to check in with you before they turn something on. Number two is you're most likely going to use licensed frequencies. These are frequencies that people aren't allowed to use other than you. So you've licensed them for that area and said, I'm the only one using this in this area. And so licensed frequencies are very popular there. Number three is most likely the default failure for the drone would be to either go home or to stay where it's at. So if it loses signal for a moment, it would either freeze or freeze and then wait and then go back to a landing spot. So those are the three levels that you probably are going to see there. I don't know that for a fact, but those are, I think, a reasonably good guess of where they go.
Courtney?
Yeah, Alex, I think at the high points there, you wouldn't be operating in the 2.4 megahertz range, 2.4 gigahertz range. You would probably have licensed frequencies. You could have multiple access points around the venue from all 4 sides, so that wherever that drone is flying, it's always within fairly short range of the access at one of your access points. And like you said, most of those drones can operate autonomously if they lose an RF signal. And it depends on whether or not they can receive GPS to maintain their stability, or if they're using downward-looking cameras to navigate around the venue. So they have some degree of autonomousness. And I don't know, I guess they would have to get clearance from the FCC to fly over crowds, but they can probably do that if they're licensed pilots.
Jeffrey?
Yeah, I remember reading about the World Series and when they used all the drones for that. And a lot of those drones were pre-programmed routes. So you had somebody that just basically did simple course correction. If the drone happen to go off course, but absolutely, if it gets completely confused, then it goes back to a home base and sets down. These drones were very small, so if it did hit somebody, it'd probably be like a bee sting. But of course, I've never had a drone hit me before like that, so I don't know exactly what that would do. But I would also guess that setting up certain types of beacons around the stadium would also help the drone in figuring out where it is and the route that it needs to go.
And don't forget, I believe in this question, MSG is Madison Square Garden, the people who just opened the Sphere in Las Vegas. So clearly they've been doing a ton of research about everything having to do with delivering video. And I'm sure in part their connection with the New York Knicks is that they want to figure out how to do large-scale events in a way that maybe they can bring it into the Sphere and use that brand new and very exciting facility to do some new entertainment concepts that will make them even more money. So let's keep our eye on it. Next question.
Next one's from the QR code. We have Francis Fry in Cambridge, Massachusetts, asking, I have an SM7B mic going into a Rodecaster. I'd like to split the audio from the mic and also send it to my FX3 so that I can get the camera and audio to sync. What do you recommend for audio splitting?
Let's go to Courtney. Courtney.
Well, I have a Rodecaster Pro, and what I would suggest is the Rodecaster has a lot of nice headphone outputs, and I have my headphone outputs routed different ways, and you can control the routing internally in the Rodecaster what goes to each headphone output, and you have a nice little audio level set that you can lay your hands on quickly and adjust the audio. I would take one of the headset outputs and run it over to your FX3 and set the FX3 on line level input and go that way rather than trying to split it somewhere, because this would then give you it would give you the high quality mic preamps of the SM7B, and there are not high quality mic preamps in that FX3. So this would probably give you a little better signal to noise ratio coming out of the Rodecaster rather than splitting it, which will have your volume if it's a passive splitter. And you can't afford to do that with an SM7B. It's already too low. So I would come out of your Rodecaster, one of the headphone outputs or the line level outputs if you're not using them, and go into line level in on the FX3.
Jeffrey Powers.
It sounds like you're looking for a pre versus post type situation. If that doesn't matter, then exactly what Courtney said, just run it through the Rodecaster, and then you get your post-production sound. But if you want a pre-production sound, then the best thing to do is to get a smaller mixer to do that, because you're sending two different types of levels to two different levels to two different devices, and you might need to control the feed to the FX3 over the Rodecaster. So having those independent faders would be a very important factor there. And if you do want to go the software route, you can get like the Voice Meter Banana and use it that way.
Alexander.
Yeah, so I would suggest there's two things that I would suggest. One, I would suggest getting the Sony XLR H1, which is their digital hot shoe XLR audio interface. You're going to want to send balanced audio into your camera here. So that's what this one looks like. And then the other thing that I would do is I would get one of these. This is an inexpensive splitter with a transformer isolated output split. So this is made by Art Pro Audio. These are, I believe, under $100, and that way you can get a nice balanced audio transformer isolated split of that signal going balanced into the camera, and that'll give you the cleanest signal without potential loss or other noise issues.
Let's go to the next question.
Next question is from Paul Walhus in Hot Springs, Arkansas. Is the new Shure MV7 Mic Bundle with millions of colors and a desktop stand the new de facto go-to mic for interviews and podcasts?
I never thought I'd be hearing millions of colors associated with a microphone. That's interesting. Alexander, start us off.
Well, that's hard to say. I mean, it's personal preference. The MV7 is a great mic, especially the new one, the MV7 Plus. Those little tabletop stands, I've always had an issue with them, mainly because of the limited flexibility unless you're doing sort of like a round table style where you have everyone sitting really close to the table. The problem is you have no adjustable boom. So oftentimes I find that people that use those stands can't get the microphone close enough to their mouth. The benefit that they have is that they're cheap. And they don't take up much space. So that's why a lot of people like them. But I would recommend getting a low-profile boom arm. One that we've talked about here a lot is the Elgato low-profile. I think it's about $90 or $100, something like that. Those are inexpensive. Newer also has actually a much nicer lower-profile boom arm, so I would recommend getting that for a boom arm. That just gives you more flexibility, and you don't have to deal with noisy springs or anything like that, and then you can just pull the microphone as close as you need it, and when you need to get up from your desk, you just push it away. It's beautiful. So that's what I would suggest there.
Courtney?
Well, it looked like an interesting mic. We haven't heard it too much other than yesterday on our show. The thing that scares me is the fact that it requires that software interface to use all the funny features like the multi-millions of colors, which is the LED panel strip that works either as a VU meter or as a color identifier if you have multiple mics. But you got to be using the USB input, I believe, for that stuff to work. Otherwise, if you're using the XLR output, it's just like a regular MV7, old MV7. So trying to preset it to, with all the noise cancellation and other magic that it has in the microphone, and then sending it out. And when it gets there, you may not have control over it because they won't have access to the app that runs it over Bluetooth, I guess. Or over USB. So I kind of worry about sending it out in a remote situation if you're not going to have a technician there.
And Alex?
We send out a lot of the MV7s, and we definitely don't want the far side to have any control over. So we just want them to turn it on and go. Somehow we missed in the software that we could lock the MV7, the current MV7, so that they couldn't. The biggest problem we have with the MV7 is people would grab onto the mic and turn it down a little bit because that was there, and they've taken that out, which is great. But I think that I don't know if it's the go-to. I think everything is different for everyone. I can tell you that for Michael Krasny's Gray Matter show, we definitely have standardized on the MV7, and I have tested quite a few mics to try to figure that out. Less expensive mics, slightly more expensive mics, lots of different stands, lots of different bits and pieces. We've gone through a lot of testing. And it wasn't that the MV7 was necessarily perfect. It was just the best of the bunch. So you don't have to be, oftentimes the fastest runner. You just have to be faster than the people around you if you're being chased by a bear. So anyway, it was slightly faster than everything else. I will say that the MV7 Plus solved most of the complaints that we had, which is that we really wanted to add a Mix Pre 3 to it, because we were like, we got to get rid of some of the sound that a lot of folks have. We wanted to be able to, the micro USB that goes into it gets loose, after many, because we're sending it to new people all the time, and they don't have delicate hands as they put those things in. And so it's starting to get a little loose. And so we have to be kind of careful of that. So the USB-C we're excited about, the noise reduction we're excited about. The stand, if we were sending it out, here's the problem with that stand: it's heavy. So if we're keeping it at home, I think I would go the same way that Alex talked about, which is just some kind of low profile, either the Elgato low profile. I think that Newer now makes one slightly less than the Elgato one. I use a more expensive Ultima from OC White, but the low profiles I think are a lot better if you're going to use it all the time. And then if you're not going to use it all the time and you're sending it out to someone, a tripod solution is about a third the weight. And so that weight costs money to send it out. So those large platforms. And then again, if I looked at it and I was like, well, if I built this kit by myself, if I just bought the MV7 on its own for MV7 Plus for $250, and then I added a stand and a headset, I'd be at about $225. So it's a little more expensive at $299 as a bundle than I would pay, but not dramatically. It's not a bad bundle. If you just wanted to buy something, send it to someone, and have it just go away, I think it's not a bad value at all. I might build one for a little less, but these are it's a lot of good solid components.
Alexander, do you want to come back in?
Yeah, I just wanted to say quickly, while I appreciate the fact that the new mic is USB-C+, USB-C Plus. The new MV7 Plus has USB-C, which is a step in the right direction. It still remains to be seen. We won't know until a lot of people start using it whether it's actually that much more robust, because if it's just a matter of the connector being soldered to the PCB and they have no other internal strain relief, I think that port is going to break just as easily.
I will say, though, the nature of a USB-C connection is very different than the nature of a micro. And I will admit, I've hated that micro connection since it was released. You know, when it went from the mini USB to the micro, I was like, this is trash. And so I was solidly in this is trash from the moment the micro USB came out, because it was so delicate. And we've had so many problems with it, and people aren't clear which way is up and all these other things. And so it was, so USB-C is an improvement over that. And USB-C is still a little bit of a flaming dumpster fire, because we don't know what connection what all these cables mean. They just didn't, they needed an iron fist of like, you have to label what your thing can do, and really that's what was missing with the USB-C spec, is that you can't say that it's USB-C or it can't be confirmed unless it has it printed on the cable, what the cable does, how much power does it it could be a rating, like it's an A, a B, a C, a D, an E. But that's the problem. That's my biggest complaint about USB-C is you just don't, with USB, with a micro USB, that it's going to be 5 volts. It's going to be, this. With USB-C, you have no idea what you're plugging it into, and unless it's labeled on the end. So usually I kind of just buy all 3.2s now. I'm just buying 3.2s, and they say it on the outside, and I know what I'm getting. They're more expensive, but at least they're all the same.
Jeffrey Powers, you wanted to get in on this?
For this MV7, basically what I did was the micro, I'm not going to lift it to show you, but I bought an actual adapter for that. So basically, and it's a right angle adapter for the micro. So it comes out of the microphone, it stretches around, it zip ties right here. And then I got another, it's basically a piece of Velcro where I can actually plug it in to my USB cable that goes to the computer. There's always a possibility that this could become the problem out of time, but this works best because then I can unplug it and then plug it back in, because one of the things that happens with this microphone is the USB fatigue, because you're moving it around too much, and that if you have a straight cable, it started, when I did have the straight cable in it, it started to bend. USB-C on this one is going to probably do the exact same thing. I really wish they would have had a locking feature that added to that, but what I do when I get the MV7 Plus is I'll probably get the same type of right angle connector, do the exact same thing, so the USB connection actually happens here rather than down there.
Let's go to the next question.
Next question is from Todd Rains in Allen, Texas. Autofocus for your voice. The new Lewitt Ray mic have a few interesting features. What do you think?
We're going to start with Courtney here. Courtney.
Well, I think it's interesting. If you look at the mic, they have a proximity detector on the microphone itself. And you see these little hash marks here. It shows you the lighting LEDs up how far you are away from the microphone, and supposedly it adjusts its level and perhaps frequency response, or some type of digital signal processing in there that controls it. And you can also set it that if you walk away from the microphone or get further away than a certain distance, it'll auto mute, which could save you those embarrassing moments where you get up and are disciplining your children, for example, in the other room, and you have your Zoom call. Hearing all of that, it would auto-mute, so we wouldn't be faced with that embarrassment. Lewitt makes some pretty good quality audio gear, so I think it might be a pretty high quality. The question is, how much control do you have over it? And how much does it affect it? If it's to reduce the proximity effect so that when you get really close to that microphone, it doesn't get real boomy, maybe they dial down or add in some compression based on the proximity that you are to the microphone, and maybe do a little bit of more of a low-end roll-off as you approach the microphone. They say it kind of handles some kind of echo cancellation. I don't know how they're doing that, but it'd be interesting to try. I have not tried it out, but I've seen the demo.
Jeffrey Powers.
Yeah, the one thing on that video demo was she in the pre part she came really close to the microphone, and of course it clipped, and then she walked far away, and then lost the voice. And then when she turned on the she turned on the audio interface, she never really got back to the front of the microphone to show how it clips. You're still going to have plosives that come out of it when you talk directly into the microphone without a proper windscreen, so that's still going to happen. And of course, I'm assuming it's going to be phantom powered. That's how it's powering this the electronics inside. So you'll need to have phantom power for that. And then when you get to that mute point, I have a feeling that there's going to be a lot of jumping around, a lot of ducking or anything like that could just really annoy as you're going. If this works well, I like the idea of being able to move away from the microphone and still get a sound, but you're going to get a different type of sound when you start moving away from the microphone, especially if you don't have a controlled room.
Alex.
Yeah, it's a pretty soft room that she's demoing this in. If you look at it, this is pretty well designed for not a lot of echo. So it's a non-square, lots of buffers, lots of things. So she's showing us how this mic works. I'm not saying that mic doesn't work. I'm just saying that they showed us something dramatic in the best possible place. Of course, that's what you'd want to do. But I'm just saying that we would need to see reviews of what this looks like, because they showed it in the best possible environment you could possibly have for a microphone to be adjusted on the fly. So I do like the idea that it could possibly make some adjustments. You send it out to somebody and they can, they can move around a little bit and it's going to be able to make some adjustments. We definitely have that challenge when people are talking of off, we want a certain level of off-axis rejection, but we want enough of it to make a difference. And Lewitt makes a lot of great stuff. So I think that I'd say the jury is out until I get to test it or somebody gets to test it. But until we do our next round or somebody does the next round, what I want to see them do it in is a hard surfaced square room that's 10 by 10 or 15 by 15. With no any kind of baffling or anything else. Show me a regular mic doing this and go back and forth and show me the Lewitt. That's the test I want to see. And once we see that test, we can have a better idea of whether it's working well or not.
Alexander.
I'm excited to try it. I am generally a fan of Lewitt microphones. As soon as I get into work today, I'm going to check the status of my shipment because I have some coming in, and I will test it. And if everyone wants me to test it in a bad room, I will also do that.
Yes, test it in a bad room.
Do you have a glass bedroom somewhere where the toughest of all? Let's go to the next question.
Next question is from Paul Walhus in Hot Springs, Arkansas. Using a table stand for a mic like the Gator Frameworks is challenging, but many top-tier podcasters prefer these for interviews on a table. Which table mic stand makes the most sense for these interview situations?
Courtney, start us out.
Well, the Gator I think they referred to is one with a little boom arm on it so that you don't have to put it directly in front of where they can get their hands on it on the base and make noise with their hands on the table. That's one of the primary problems with a table-mounted mic stand is they're not isolated from the table itself. So if you get somebody who's laying their fists down on the table or setting a coffee cup down, it's going to translate that unless you've got a really good shock mount on the microphone that's mounted on the end of the stand. I prefer something that's not on the table. It's a boom with a boom arm. A microphone stand with a boom arm that is sitting on the floor, and then you can bring it in front of the person so that way it comes in. It doesn't interfere with their hands on the table because it comes in off of the arm from the side. And it also, is not going to translate anything that happens on the table into the microphone.
Jeffrey Powers.
So what I thought he was talking about was the actual podcast arm, which kind of looks like just basically an over the mount arm with a table clamp to it. For table clamps, usually you have a little metal piece that clamps to the table, and I find that to be the worst point of contact, of course. So what I do is I put a little bit of neoprene or some sort of padding in between those, and you can't get too smushy on the padding, or else the arm actually will start to fall off the table. So you got to get the right combination to put it on the table and then clamp it down, like I do with this one over here. The one thing about the Gator Frameworks desk-mounted broadcast arms is that I see them where they have dials on each of the joints. It is spring-loaded, but there are dials to tighten it on each of the joints, which means that if somebody needs to make any types of changes, they have to go and they have to untighten it and bring it down. The Compass, which was made by Blue Microphones, had this really great option where you could actually lift it off the arm. Of course, you can't do it during the show, but then you had like a little Allen wrench option to tighten it and loosen it. So whatever microphone you end up putting on there, it will help keep it as stable as possible. So I would look at it for anything that has pneumatics in it. The underslung ones that we use, like this one, have pneumatics in it. So if I do need to move it, you don't hear it as much. And of course, being able to slide it around. Yeah, the next point of contact would be the point where you can turn it back and forth. And I don't have a real good way to actually pad that.
Alex.
I have one of those mics. One of those mic stands. One, like laying around. It is bad. The boom, having a nice heavy bass and being able to throw something down and do it is great. And if it's a portable system, it's actually not that bad. Now, I oftentimes prefer floor-based ones, specifically because of what Courtney talked about, with table noise and everything else. So I tend to use a floor-based mic stand that you get, just at any music store, that allows me to it's still in the frame there. You're still going to see it, but it allows me to stay away from that, from the table noise itself. But I do have a couple mic stands that I'd sit on there, and I do like this one better. When you have one coming straight up, as Jeffrey was outlining, it's kind of like that's what you got. It's going to come up. You can't get. So what's really nice about having the arm is that I can really place that mic exactly where I want it, and it's going to kind of hang down into that area. Now, I will say that I think that when most people start building a podcast, and after they've done it for a little while, and if they do a little technical research, they'll end up with almost everybody ends up with an underslung arm of some kind. So whether that's the Elgato, the one that you see in a lot of studios, or the one that I'm using, the OC White Ultima. But you see, so when I work in studios, I see these all. That's how I know about them, because you see them all over the place. And so you see them; they're very popular. The Elgato ones are also popular, a lot less expensive, a third of the cost. A little less control, but still very, very good for the price. And the reason you use the underslung ones oftentimes is because they don't get into camera shots. They don't get into a lot of other things. They're a little bit more in there. It's good for radio, and I guess podcasts are okay if you're never going to do any video. But having a kind of an overhanging mic arm is usually something most of us get rid of as we start to do more and more broadcast. That if it includes video. So I think it just depends on where they're going. I'd be careful of taking too many cues from podcasters and creators. A lot of times a lot of the ones that you see that are really popular have not thought through their solutions very technically. They saw somebody else do it, and there's a little bit of there's this, I guess, and it becomes a fashion to do something that makes a lot of us, have heart palpitations. Like, I'm now going to take a lav, and I'm going to talk into it like this. It's so goofy. Like, sorry, but so goofy, just a level of goof there. Of I will hold this up and talk into it like this it just makes me sad. So anyway, that's all. Be careful of following too many creators on that. It doesn't mean that you have to go old school broadcast for everything. Just research everything a little bit and know what we hope to do sometimes here as best we can. Sometimes we're still learning as well, but what we hope to do is show you some of the tried and true solutions for those things as well, and then you can make a choice between whether you want to hold up a lav or use a real mic.
Speak into the back end of a condenser because the label's on the wrong side. Alexander,
here's the problem. I did a whole Mac break that way. I had put this on for the first time in years, and it was all in a rush and everything else, and no one told me, and I felt like I sound, but my whole system had been rearranged. To defend myself, my whole system had been rearranged. I kind of put it back in. I was like, man, I sound really bassy. I don't really understand it, and then there was some point where Leo went for a commercial break, and I looked down and I was like, oh no.
I saw a Lady Gaga clip, and she was speaking into, I can't remember if it was the Sony 800 or a Neumann, but it was backwards, and I thought, that's dumb. But then I thought, wait a second, this is Lady Gaga. The logo pointing toward the camera was worth so much more that they probably made a mic for her specifically with the logo on that side so that she could speak correctly into the mic and they could see the logo. It's crazy. Alexander?
Yeah, I'm going to show the mic arm that I discovered recently, and this is the newer, the brand new one, the low profile one. I bought one to test it, and I actually like it a lot better than the Elgato. I think it's much more sturdy. It seems to hold more weight. The problem with the Elgatos, I find, is that I don't like the ball joint on the end. I find it's too many times where, and I've got a client who likes to rest his hands on the microphone, which is very annoying. And a couple of times the microphone the RE20 just fell right down because the ball joint's not strong enough. So these are the ones that I'm now switching to, and I'm no longer buying the Elgato. So these have been pretty successful for me. And like Alex said, yeah, that goofy thing with holding the little transmitter belt packs to your mouth, that my client does that too, and I can't get him to stop. He's just like, that's my style. That's my style.
Oh my God.
I'm so dear. Bad. Alex, you want to come back in?
And someone had mentioned, Vic Hernandez had mentioned the Pod Save America, and I will admit, I look at the Pod Save America. Here's how they're using these mics here, and I can't believe that they have a large podcast and they do it that way. Like when I had my first little podcast, of course I did it that way because that's what we all did. But we very, very quickly realized that if we have a drill, we can drill a hole into that table and then we can put low profile mic arms in, and then it's amazing, or better. And what a lot of these tables do, the best tables that we've worked with, I don't know if I can say which ones that we use there, but what they do is they take this, if you look at this here, they'll take the center part in here and they'll float it. So they'll connect all these mics. The mics are a little bit, they've really spread this out a little bit, but they'll have this here, and they float this section up. So they move that section up and they separate it from the outer rim. So you can put your arms on it, you can have your paper on it and everything else, but the arms come out like this, so that you have low profile arms coming out of that floated section in the center. And then you still have this wider table. It looks really nice and it works exceptionally well, and you don't have any table noise. So anyway, so that's again, if they are careful, they won't have any table noise, or maybe they don't care. I don't listen to that podcast that often, but I think that what you want to do is try to create an environment where the person who's speaking has to think the least amount about the tech. How do you create something? And so when you buy all this tech and when you build it all, the goal is to have it all do the things it needs to do so the person can just be present and talk. And I can't imagine having 4 mic stands on a table and not be thinking about that during the show.
Let's go to the next. Wait a second. I just had to look at something. Yes, go to the next question. Sorry.
Next question's from Rion Smith in Trinidad, West Indies. Hi, team. Can we build a document template rubric /lists to build virtual events? Lists like you said the other day, Alex, people for snacks greeters versus Zoom room greeters giveaways. Alex?
A bunch of us have talked about, or a few of us we sit around talking about the fact that we should really write a book, like on how to do this. The informal way of trying to work through this was how Office Hours began, which was that I wanted to make sure that people understood that there were better ways to do some of the stuff that they were about to do, because I had done all the wrong things at the beginning too. And so, we hope to keep on doing it in a live way here. It's just a matter of available time, to put together a book is a lot or something. I think that we can try to put those together. But I was just thinking about this. I was going to do some kind of listicle on Twitter about why I noticed that I keep on telling people they should do virtual events, but I will go to almost nobody's virtual events. And I realized that what is the gap there? And I realized that a lot of it is just that the audio and the video. And I started listing off all the things that I hate about the virtual events that I go to. And I realized I should probably write those down. So to answer your question, to solve your question, the first thing I'm going to do is just complain on Twitter. And then we'll start thinking about whether we can make it more formal.
And remember, you can always ask a series of questions here about virtual events and pick up the information that everyone will get to see and understand at the same time. close to the top of the hour now, and a couple of special announcements. One in particular that we wanted to make today. Many of you who watch the show remember and were very saddened at the passing of our friend Dennis Champion Walker, who was an integral part of the show. He was in the back-end community for a long time. He passed away recently. And for those of you who knew Dennis or just are interested, there will be a kind of a memorial service, and we're going to show that live in after hours tomorrow. So for those of you who are interested in that, it is going to be at 6 a.m. Pacific time, UTC 1300. If you're on the East Coast, 9 o'clock. So I think many people who were touched by Dennis's life, and that is almost everybody in the Office Hours family, are going to gather to say pay our last respects to somebody that we really liked an awful lot, who left sadly way too early. So that's a little bit later on. That's tomorrow. Isadora Live, still coming up at 2 p.m. Eastern today. Mimo Live with Oliver Breidenbach, 12 a.m. It says 12 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time. I don't think it's 12 a.m. I think it's 12 p.m. Anyway, those things are coming up. And don't forget, our second hour is just ahead. We'll be talking about the movie business, particularly telling stories with editing. So we'll be right back with that. Welcome to our second hour today. Today